Hello everyone and welcome to the program Midday Discourse on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining. It's a beautiful week, a beautiful day, Monday, a bit rainy, the early hours of today here in Abuja, but we're all here in the studio always talk about pressing issues that it's being faced by Nigerians on a day-to-day activity. So on today's edition, we'll be looking at the crisis within the petroleum sector and how it has affected Nigerians, generally affected. We're going to be looking at the causes that is contributing to this factor, looking at the economic implications, looking at government responses, and then we'll also x-ray the social implications as well as also dwelling on the way forward because there's a whole lot going on. Like we all know, the NNPC have always, promised that the refineries we have in Nigeria here for more than 5 times that is going to come into process, meaning they'll start producing and again refining products. They've promised us this back-to-back, for over 7 times we've been hearing stories. Then fast forward, Dangote refinery came into light. Nigerians were excited that finally importation of crude and all of that is going to stop, and then we'll start getting fuel at a, subsidized rates. That's fast forward again to this period. That's not the case. Where twice in just 1 month, the price kept going up. It's got increased by NNPC. A whole lot of persons have reacted differently to this cost, and it's affecting the day-to-day Nigerians. A whole lot of people depend on this, on crude, rather on PMS, fuel, for their day-to-day living. There's now high cost in food, high cost of transportation, and then the inflation rate is actually not even looking good. People focusing and then suffering from this angle, the CBN governor decides to tight the monetary policy. Now, anchor borrowers, people can't even borrow no more. So there's just a whole lot of challenge. So now we want to x-ray all of these angles of the crisis on today's edition of the program. But before we dive into this conversation, we'll be going on a quick break. When I return back, I'll be introducing my guests who would help us understand all of these and then, the way forward from all of this crisis that we're facing in the oil and gas sector. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.
Check. It's midday. Then it's Midday Discourse. Midday Discourse is a program that covers trending local and international news, current issues, and human-related topics. Join Samuel Odi weekdays 1 p.m. on Global Television. The discussion starts here.
Yes, many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Midday Discourse on Global Television. You're not late. We're about to dive into the conversation. So I have live with me here in the studio Victor Aliko, who is a development economist. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor, for joining on to this edition of the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, so there's a whole lot of, crisis going on within the oil and gas sector, right? And then Nigerians have been promised milk and honey from the oil and gas, but now it just seems as if we are not getting what we were promised. as in regarding to the fact that fuel is going to, the price of PMS is actually going to be subsidized and all of that. But looking at these angles now, can we say like corruption have eaten so deep into the system, that's why we're witnessing all of this crisis in the oil and gas sector, and prices keep going up and up on monthly basis?
Yeah, so if you look at the challenge we're having in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria, it's humongous. It stands down to history. Because of time, perhaps we may not be able to dive into the historical perspective around it. But the main bane of the issue is corruption. Corruption because it was corruption that made a lot of Nigerians believe that those benefiting from subsidies were actually the rich and not the poor. And hence they felt there was need for the subsidy to be removed so they can channel the funds from subsidy to other important aspects of the economy. But if you look at corruption particularly, you will see conversations around smuggling in our borders. The conversation around removal of subsidy was that a lot of our crudes were being subsidized here in Nigeria and they are smuggled to neighboring countries. And hence they needed to stop payment of subsidies because other countries were benefiting from payment of subsidies from the Nigerian government. But again, a lot of persons did not admit that it was a public service problem because our friends, the custom, the immigration in the borders are corrupt. Then the habit of exchanging monies to allow activities of smuggling within our borders to happen, and hence it supported arguments for removal of subsidy. If you also look at conversations around crude oil theft or sabotage in the South-South, it revolves around corruption because our security agencies are complacent and they are also conniving with the guys in the South-South to sabotage our national assets, making Nigeria not to hit OPEC benchmark, or even perhaps our production capacity as the largest producer of crude oil in Africa. So it stands around corruption. Even when there was subsidy audit, conversations and findings of that audit was not released to the public. It was made a bit private. It was the report was not open to Nigerians. And a lot of Nigerians, including myself, has called for subsidy audit to audit what have been spent in the last couple of years for subsidy payment. Yeah, so it revolves around corruption.
Talking about subsidy removal now and payments. So given the fact that this current administration, first day of office, Mr. President said no more subsidies. So we're expected to have saved some money. Talking about audits now, do you think we've been able to save, and actually what we've been able to save from subsidy removal is actually being used for infrastructural development? So
that's part of the challenge. Yeah. Because if you look at part of the challenges some of us are arguing is that there is a communication gap.
Okay.
During the Jonathan's administration, I think in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, there was partial removal of subsidy. And from the partial removal of subsidy, we had what we call SHORP, Subsidy Reinvestment Program. So this was, they were able to tell Nigerians this was how much was going to be saved, and we're going to channel these resources to certain sectors. But with this current administration, what I've told some persons is called a phased-by-phased approach removal. So that's why you've been seeing the prices have been increasing gradually not outrightly. So they've been doing a phased approach to subsidy removal. And communication is not clear. Look at the happenings between the NNPC and the Dangote issues. Shrouded in secrecy. People are running Nigeria as if it's a secret court. It shouldn't be so. But the main issue is we don't know exactly how much have been saved from subsidy. There's no report.
If there's money that
there's no report, there's no data of such from either the NNPC, from the Minister of Finance, from the presidency itself. So we actually don't know how much have been saved. Perhaps conversations from that will not necessitate us to know how we want to spend this money, or who to hold accountable, or where these funds have been channeled to. So these are part of the challenge. There is clearly no plan. There is clearly no communication. There is clearly no plan to mitigate the challenges or the impact of this subsidy removal. So all of these conversations are part of the challenge we're having. Nobody knows, except perhaps those inside the fence.
Well, like they say, there's a whole lot going on within the NNPC, but let's leave the NNPC for now. Though we can't totally leave them away from it because, they are all bent on, importation of crude and all of that. So how can, we say that the country's reliance, on crude importation, how can we say it has contributed to the current crisis we are facing? Because we used to be we're producers. We produce over 1.3 million barrels per day, and then we're all bent on importation of crude. So how can we say this now has contributed to this crisis we're facing?
So ideally, to be candid with you, we don't have, Nigeria as a country, we don't have any business importing fuel.
To start with.
We don't. We have 4 refineries. All of these 4 refineries, if properly managed or if allowed to be privatized by the federal government, would function effectively. Their capacities are enough to cater for local consumption within our economy. So conversations around importation of fuel, ideally those conversations should not even come on board or shouldn't even be in the front burner. You see Dangote's revelation about some individuals in NNPC having a recycling plant or a refinery in Malta.
Yes.
Malta is a small country, the smallest country
in Europe.
One of the smallest countries in Europe. In fact, Malta, the smallest state in Nigeria, which is Bayelsa State by population, is larger than Malta as a country. We have no business with importation. Again, look at the angle from the FX, our foreign exchange. Before our currency was devalued,
yes.
or perhaps what we call the floating of the naira, we used to have dollar around 500, 5 something.
Yes.
But at the moment, dollar is about 1,650 after it was floated. So floating our currency, almost the same period, less than 6 months interval when subsidy was removed, was catastrophic. It then meant that importing more crude at very high FX would have ripple impact and effect on the economy. And remember, the Nigerian economy is a volatile economy. Volatile because of the volatility of the dollar, exchange rates, external geopolitics around other countries could influence activities because we're an import-dependent country. So if you float the naira, you remove subsidy, it's an invitation for chaos. It then means fuel will be extremely expensive. But I've always put up this argument that if you look at conversations around purchasing power parity, if you look at conversations around inflation rate, unemployment rate, in other countries, take for instance Libya. Libya is the country that has the cheapest PMS in Africa. The second highest after Libya is Algeria. Libya has inflation rate of 2%. Algeria has an inflation rate of 6%. But Nigeria has an inflation rate of 32.15%. So these are the issues. When they compare that the prices in other countries, in other climes are cheaper and hence we have to remove subsidy, Nigeria is one of the cheapest countries in terms of PMS in the world. They also forget that purchasing power parity, inflation, GDP growth rate, unemployment rate, and all that. These are dynamics that differs between countries. And for those of us who are policy experts or economists, we are not moved by those conversations.
Well, let's look at this other angle. Still on the causes of this, what impact have militant attack? Militants all in the Niger Delta region have always, agitated and then fought, all these companies coming in, one saying the companies coming are not even doing their due diligence, giving the communities what they're supposed to give them and then at the end of the day, it leads to rioting and then vandalizing of the pipelines. How has this, contributed to, the little infrastructural challenges that we're facing in these angles?
So if you look at what is happening in the South, I'm from Rivers. It's a region I come from. But I usually tell people that amnesty was a wrong decision. If you read the book, Negotiation with Terrorists, it's an interesting book I recommend for most people to read. If you read that book, it will give you an exposition into how to negotiate with, perhaps, I won't call them terrorists per se when they started, freedom fighters or resource control agitators and all that. But giving amnesty to individuals who took up arms against the state, whereas some other individuals in the Niger Delta or in the South that did not take arms were not given amnesty. So the whole essence of the agitation was the region was grossly underdeveloped and they felt they needed to develop the region. They created NDDC, they gave 13% oil derivative and all that. But all of these issues have not solved the issue. So Niger Delta attack or the militant attack in the Niger Delta is one that has hitherto affected the economy because the major source of foreign revenue for Nigeria is crude oil.
Yes.
And then at the moment we produce between 1.3 to 1.4 million barrels per day. Yes. Some of them are arguing 1.7. But ideally, with our potential, we should be producing between 2 billion to 2.5 million barrels per day. But why can't we produce up to that amount? It's because of activities of these boys in the Niger Delta. And these activities have not helped our national assets in terms of our major source of foreign revenue for the federal government. So for us, if the major source to which we gain FX or revenue as a country is affected, it then means it could have ripple impact or could cripple the economy. It means, for instance, the budget. The budget was pegged around 1.7 to 1.8 million barrels of oil per day.
Yes.
So if you're not hitting up to that amount, it then means there will be shortfall in revenue we expect from the budget. So activities of Niger Delta militants in the region have not helped. That has exacerbated the issue around our FX from or revenue from oil. But I want to believe that with the current security architecture on ground, they have made promises, and also Tantita, owned by Tompolo, a former ex-militant, who has made promises that they will ensure to see how they can improve our oil production per day, even if not much has been done. But remember, there was a time it went as low as almost 900,000 barrels.
Yes.
Now we are around 1.3 to 1.4, but we're hoping that we should be able to hit up to 2 million to 2.5 million barrels per day.
But what do you think can be done for us to be able to hit this mark, around at least 2 million barrels per day?
Number one, I think, is the security agencies.
Okay.
They must step up their game. The truth is, Abacha have said, if there are issues in Nigeria, I think Abacha, one of his aides, if there is terrorism in Nigeria beyond 24 hours, then the government is personally involved. So it then means the government, on their own part, when I mean the government now, government institutions,
yes.
the police, the NSCDC, the army, the navy, those in charge of manning those borders, manning those pipelines, they must step up their games. They know those involved in sabotaging our national asset. And another thing I've also advocated for, if these guys, through local means, are fabricating technologies to refine crude locally, why not legalize it? Why not let them register modular refineries? There are modular refineries already. Why not harness the talent from these guys? Train them, incorporate them legally so that they can harness these talents and see how they can pay taxes. They can register these companies instead of becoming illegal refineries. So this way will help us curtail the loss, revenue loss from the aspect of the government, manpower loss, and sometimes death of these individuals through explosion. And also remember the environmental impact of all of these illegal refining activities going on in the South-South. The last time I traveled to Port Harcourt, we had what we call the soot, the black soot, where you see dust.
Yes.
And all, those things have environmental hazardous impact
and it's
on people
harmful to people's health even.
To people's health. So that's why I think the government should, apart from the security agencies, the government should see how they can formalize these activities, appreciate the technology and see how you can incorporate them, improve the quality of this PMS produced within this region and see how you can make value out of it.
But with everything going on now, do you see the 4 refineries we have in Nigeria, aside from Dangote's, the other refineries, do you think with everything going on, do we see them coming to life anytime soon? I
doubt, at least with this current NNPC administration. I doubt. They have made more than 7 promises. They have failed in those promises. So I don't see refineries coming back to life. So refining in Nigeria has shown us successive administration, remember, not just this administration, if we want to be fair to them. Successive administrations have shown that these refineries cannot work. Obasanjo administration privatized it to Dangote. And co. Yaradua came on board and cancelled the privatization agreement. That was what necessitated Dangote going to build his own refinery from scratch. So it then means conversations around having the refineries working I think we are daydreaming if we think it's going to come to friction, at least with this current NNPC on board. And Mr. President, on his own part, have not shown enough political action and political will to get those refineries to work. We have been told that series of trillions of naira has been going on in trying to revive those moribund refineries. But where are these monies going to? Who are those handling this contract? Why can't these refineries work? If they cannot work, then privatize these refineries. Let's see whether perhaps private individuals can manage these refineries, maintain these refineries, run these refineries, and not the government.
Okay, looking at those angles now and talking about Mr. President, you know, during the era, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, he announced himself as the Minister for Petroleum. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is seeming to be the Minister of Petroleum, though he hasn't verbally, say that he is, but we currently don't have any, and, he's like the one in the forefront. Before we get into that angle of the conversation, crude for Naira. Now, at what rate is the crude now being sold? Is it the equivalent of the dollar, or is actually being sold at an actual price? Like, you wouldn't need to go look for dollar, given the fact that, okay, now they want it to be subsidized. They want the price to be fair for every Nigerian, right? So normally a barrel is sold for around maybe 80 to $75 per barrel. So looking at those angles now, does it mean that Nigerians now need to go get Naira equivalent to Dangote need to go get Naira now equivalent to dollar before you would be able to get, or is actually being sold at a subsidized rate in Naira?
Yeah, so like you rightly mentioned, the sales of crude oil, we have what we call the Naira for crude swap. So the sales of crude oil at the moment, they are selling at the equivalent of the Naira. So it then means if we are selling, for instance, if crude oil is selling in the international market, remember it's an international commodity,
yes,
at $75 per barrel. It then means you multiply $75 times 1,600 per dollar.
Yes.
The Naira equivalent is what you pay to the NNPC to buy the crude. Yeah, so that's what it means. So it means it reduces the pressure on dollar. So you don't need dollar anymore.
You just need Naira.
So long as you have a refinery here in Nigeria. So remember, not only Dangote is the biggest. We have other smaller modular refineries and all that. So for them to have access to crude from the federal government, all they need to do is provide the Naira equivalent. So they don't need to go and source for FX somewhere. The process of sourcing for FX is another stress and all that. Getting the FX at humongous or higher prices, and then refining and all that. So it has cut all of that off. So what we expect to see, ideally, in a normal situation is in the coming months, we expect once crude is sold in Naira, we expect it to be cheaper for Nigerians. Okay. Ideally, that's the way it should be. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, looking at those angles now, well, it's actually being said so as the Naira would be able to strengthen and then get more momentum in the FX market. Well, we hope that all of that happens, but the bottom line, Nigerians don't want to hear stories, they just want to get fuel at a very cheap rate. Well, before we go into the other angles of the conversation, looking at the economic implications and social implications, we'll be going on a quick break. When we return back, Midday Discourse continues.
Check. It's midday, then it's Midday Discourse. Midday Discourse is a program that covers trending local and international news, current issues, and human-related topics. Join Samuel Odi weekdays 1 p.m. on Global Television. The discussion starts here.
Yes, many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Midday Discourse on Global Television. And Mr. Victor, can you say this crisis, given the fact that oil is the major contributor to Nigerians' GDP, can you say that this crisis has affected our GDP? Of
course. If you look at conversations around the PIA, Petroleum Industry Act, signed by law by the past administration, and if you also look at conversations around the investment by some of foreign multinationals out of the Nigerian market as a result of perhaps corruption and certain lack of guarantee for their investment into our economy. It means a lot of foreign multinational companies have left the country. So it has, of course, it had to affect our GDP growth rate as a country. And then, like I said, not being able to meet up to our OPEC benchmark and the benchmark we had on our budget. It then means there will be revenue shortfall. Remember, if there was excess of it, we'll have the excess crude account. But we don't even have up to that amount, not to talk of excess crude account. So it means revenues that will be available to the government, that will be shared among the 30 states and the 774 local governments would plummet. Reducing means economic activities will slow down. Slowing down economic activities will mean activities of businesses within the economy would not grow as much. And then look at conversations around foreign direct investment.
Yes,
around security, the impact. Security means a lot of investors cannot come into the Nigerian market and all that. So, of course, it's affecting our GDP growth rate. And we expect to even see single-digit economic growth rate within the economy in the next few quarters, or even in the next few years.
Talking about foreign investors now, we know just a few weeks ago, the Minister of Finance made mention of taking away tax for deep-sea oil investors. Do you think this is an avenue for us to start witnessing more foreign investors into the country?
So foreign investors are more knowledgeable than we think. Before I spend billions of dollars to invest in an economy, I'll do a good background check. I'll hire the best of consultants to advise me on happenings, honest happenings within the economy. So even down to the conversation you said earlier, Mr. President has no business being the Minister of Petroleum. He has no business. Get an expert. These experts are people who are familiar with the industry, who are even familiar to some of these investors, who can even help you woo some of these investors. So investors coming into the Nigerian market is one that is tricky because look at the investment climate in the country is not favorable. A lot of businesses are exiting the country. Look at purchasing power parity. Even purchasing power of the citizens of the country is very low. It then means goods or services you render to Nigerians, you would take that goods to be an essential commodity for Nigerians to even consider paying for it or parting their money for those goods or services. So it means investors will struggle to come into our economy. For reasons around no guarantees for their investment security. 2, lack of infrastructure. We are battling with issues around electricity, access to road, and all that. These are concerns. Now, again, issues around policy framework in the country. The PIA, some persons have said, was not properly thought out. There are conversations from Agora policy at the moment to even review the PIA. Some persons are saying issues around corruption, bureaucratic bottlenecks. Investors understand these things. And when they see these challenges, they would not come and invest in the economy.
So taking away, isn't the taxing is not even the way to go
to... It's a good incentive, ideally. Ideally, it's a good incentive. It's to woo investors. It's to tell them, hey, we're reducing these taxes for you. So you can come to invest for so number of years in the country. Either tax rebate, tax holidays, or even reduction in taxes and all that. But if the essentials, like I said, policy framework, guarantee for investment, security are not on board, issues around corruption are not tackled, issues around bureaucratic bottlenecks and challenges, ease of doing business, or what the World Bank calls business readiness at the moment. If they're not there, investors will not come, regardless of the reduction in tax rate you give to them.
Okay, you made mention of businesses and livelihood of Nigerians. Now, lots of SMEs are folding. They can't even keep up no more because of tariff, either not tariff, they'll complain about fuel. So how has this been? What does this mean for up-and-coming entrepreneurs that want to venture into one or two businesses?
Before we even look at entrepreneurs, perhaps let's even look at Nigerians. So if you look at the impact of this policy, first is going to increase poverty.
Poverty, yes.
The number of Nigerians living below the poverty line of $1.9 per day would increase. If I remember my statistics very well, 133 million Nigerians were multidimensionally poor, according to the MBS.
Yes.
Now, if you look at issues...
That's the former...
Yes.
It's not even updated yet.
Yes, that's since 2022.
Yes.
Now, if you look at conversations around purchasing power of Nigerians, it would drop naturally. So it means more Nigerians will fall below the poverty line. That's one. Then if you look at issues around inflation, we expect the inflation figure for September to be released, I think, this week or next week.
Yeah.
Inflation is expected to increase. That's second. Now, if you look at conversations around job loss, it's either Nigerians are quitting their jobs or Nigerians are resigning from their job because they are spending majority or a huge chunk of their salaries on transportation, or the impact will be that they will be sacked as a result of businesses closing down or shutting down or winding down in the economy. A lot of MSMEs are closing.
Closing, yes.
Then another fourth impact is that, remember, when businesses are closing, when a lot of people are losing their job losses, it will have an impact in terms of taxation, personal income tax or
yes.
company income tax to the government.
GDP declining.
Yes, will decline. So it will reduce. That's another point. Again, from the social part of it, a lot of Nigerians' morals will drop. For those who will still continue with their jobs, they will be disgruntled. For those in the government, productivity will drop because salaries, the value of the salaries are dropping. And remember the minimum wage that was approved by Mr. President, 70,000. Yeah. This increase makes mockery and makes no sense whatsoever to Nigerians. Especially remembering that Nigeria has the highest number of people living in extreme poverty, according to Austrian-based organization, World Poverty Clock. These challenges are there. Then for MSMEs or businesses, like you rightly mentioned, it means a lot of businesses will fold because Nigeria is I call it sometimes fuel economy. Fuel economy because it's either you're using fuel in your business premises, or you're using fuel at home, or you're using fuel to drive to work, commute to work. Yeah. So fuel revolves around, it has a lot of impact on us as Nigerians. As for MSMEs, they will have, a lot of them will shut down because they can no longer keep up with the rising cost of PMS. That's one. Then for upcoming entrepreneurs, a lot of them will be discouraged. A lot of them will be discouraged from going into business. And I even had a friend who called me months back and said he wanted to invest in business. And I said, this is not the best time to invest in business at the moment. The economy is volatile. The economy is uncertain. There are a lot of policy changes. So you have to whittle down and wait a little bit. But why that same young man is saving his money in the bank to wait, remember, the value of that same money, the money is reducing, is depreciating. Yes. So these are part of the challenges. So for young entrepreneurs, remember, the Japa wave now is increasing. A lot of them no longer want to invest. They would rather take that sum of money and look for any neighboring country or countries in Europe or America to the popular Japa for whatever purpose. So it's reducing our human resources, quality human resources that live in the country. It's also discouraging a lot of young entrepreneurs from going into investment.
You know, talking about salaries and, you know, purchasing power, a friend of mine also, we were just, you know, having a chit chat just yesterday, and he was like, his salary can't even fill his tank in a month. Yeah. So imagine how dire and how difficult it's getting per day. But let's look at another angle, how this crisis have affected education and then as well as economic productivity. Looking at the angles where you said we have a whole lot of Japa syndrome now. A whole lot of young Nigerians are actually living, you know, getting themselves involved in other aspects of, you know, innovations and technology. What does this tell now about Nigeria in the next couple of years with all of this inflation rates going higher by the day and things, cost of living just getting skyrocketing? How can one survive with this in this current economy?
So I'll look at it from two angles, the positive and the negatives. Yes. So, but let's look at the negatives first. We need young Nigerians, young able-bodied Nigerians, young, innovative, high-thinking Nigerians to run an economy. We need human resources, quality human resources to drive our economy. So if vast majority of young Nigerians are leaving the country to search for greener pastures in other countries, it then means it would impact our economic growth drive in the country. It means quality of manpower is exiting the country to develop other economies. It will not help our country, that's one. On the second part, if you also look at young people who are leaving, you would not entirely blame them for seeking for greener pastures in other countries. Because I was telling a friend, if you're earning 1 million naira now, the value of 1 million naira now is almost 300,000 last year. So it means they want to look for places where their values, their talent will be better appreciated. So it will help them to enable them live a better and perhaps good quality of life, guaranteed security, even for themselves and their families. That's on one part. But there are positives to the Japa syndrome or the Japa wave. One of which is we can turn our brain drain to brain gain. So at the moment, a lot of Nigerian youths are leaving the country to develop other economies. I listened to a doctor who wrote on, I think, one of the newspapers based in Canada, and he said he wants to come back to help the Nigerian economy in terms of health. So what we expect to see is, in the coming years, vast majority of Nigerians who have left the country either through JAPA or through studies, we can bring them back to support our economy, to develop our economy. And the last positives from the JAPA wave is what we call diaspora remittance. So for vast majority of Nigerians who are outside the country, remember they remit a huge amount of money because of the drop in value of our currency. They remit a lot of money either to build houses, either to their parents, either to their siblings, and all that. So Nigeria has one of the highest diaspora remittance in the world. So it means we have a lot of our citizens who are outside the country, but they are remitting FX, either through dollars, pounds, euros, or any currency, back to our economy to help develop the economy. So we can take a clue from what India did. India, that's how they became one of the best in terms of medical tourism in the world. They brought back some of their best doctors, gave them interest-free loans, and say, hey, invest in our economy, use the expertise you have learned several years ago from outside our country to help the health sector in India. And Nigeria can take a clue from that.
Looking at that angle, you know, there is no top world company that you go to now that you not see an Indian being either in tech or something, AI or so. So I think, but are there policies that the government can put in place that would actually want to drive these Nigerians to even come back home in the first instance to come and, you know, start developing with the little that they've learned abroad?
Yeah, like I mentioned, one, fixed security. People need to, security means security of investment and security of life and properties. I won't be a Nigerian who's living in diaspora, want to come back to Nigeria only for my business premises either to be burnt, to be burgled or something. Security is sacrosanct, it's important. One, fixed security, that's one. Then secondly, make our business environment friendly for businesses to thrive. So if you have an economy where vast majority of your citizens understand that corruption is the bane of our friends in different government agencies or parastatals, they will not be encouraged to invest in the economy. That's another part to look at it from. And also, we need to fix infrastructure. Issues like steady power, steady electricity. I don't want to be a medical doctor who would be practicing in the US. I'm used to stable power, only for me to come back to Nigeria and spend huge amount of money on PMS, on diesel, and all that. So critical infrastructures must be fixed. We must have a right policy framework that would support business readiness. We must also tackle issues around public service or bureaucratic corruption and bottlenecks or procurement-related fraud. That's another angle. And of course, we must make security of life, and properties and investment to be safe.
Okay, as we begin to wrap up, Mr. Victor, let's look at this angle now, though it's about, you know, moving forward from all of this. So what role can alternative energy source, e.g. maybe solar, gas, play in terms of mitigating all of this crisis? Yeah,
so if you look at what they did, Mr. President said, I think within 4 years, they are now investing in CNGs.
CNGs, yes.
So ideally, investment in CNG is supposed to reduce the consumption or the demand for PMS.
Yes.
Remember what determines the price. There are 3 things that determine the price of PMS, petrol. Or more than 3, but there are 3, 4, or 4 key things. Number 1 is demand and supply. Interplay of demand and supply determines the price of PMS. The second part of it is the price of crude oil in the international market. The third, which is very important, is the operating cost in terms of distribution and refining costs. The fourth is tax and levies. So if you look at it, the interplay between demand and supply is critical in ensuring that we address issues around it. So the CNGs initiative is one that is encouraging, is one that is very important because it will help support the climate change drive. But we expect that the CNG would reduce the number of demand for PMS. And when it reduces the number of individuals demanding for PMS, the price is expected to drop. But again, we should also remember that solar is expensive. Solar is one aspect of, what's the right word to use? Solar is one aspect of alternative source of energy supply that is not easily affordable to individuals. Before now, with 600,000, you can have a 1 battery system. In your house, that will charge at least your TV, your phones, and basic. But at the moment, because of FX, again, remember. So there's a policy interconnectedness between these issues. At the moment, for you to also have that 1 battery system, you need about 1.2 million. How many Nigerians can afford it? Wind energy is not common in Nigeria. It's not in use. So these are alternative sources of power supply. PMS. Can Nigerians go with PMS? No. Do we have steady power supply in Nigeria? It's a challenge. Even those of us on band A, it's humongous on our pocket. It's telling on our pocket. How many Nigerians can afford an electricity bill, an average electricity bill of about 70,000 naira on a monthly basis? It then means some of them will resort to either energy theft, or some individuals like us will resort to conserving energy or becoming more energy efficient. We'll stay at homes, you will not even know that there is light. Put off all the bulbs and use natural light or sunlight. So these are the impacts. But we expect that alternative source of power supply is something Nigerians can explore, but they cannot explore those alternatives when their income level is very low.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor Aliko, for joining us on today's edition. But what's your final take on all of this, and what policies do you think that the NNPC and the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu need to focus more on so as to help cope out this cost of PMS?
Fantastic. So the first, I think, Mr. President, I've said this on several fora, should resign as the Minister of Petroleum. Get an expert to man that ministry. That's number one. Then the second aspect of it is let our refineries be working. Let's get our refineries functioning. That's number two. Number three, be more honest and transparent with how much we have saved and areas you want to channel these funds so Nigerians can demand for accountability. That's number three. Another important thing we need to do is to support MSMEs. They are the front burner. So we need to have a lot of businesses. I will support energy subsidy for businesses in Nigeria. So businesses should be supported in terms of subsidies for energy, electricity. If you look at other countries, since the Russian-Ukraine war, a lot of countries in Europe, including United Kingdom, Germany, they are subsidizing electricity for even household and businesses. I think it's something that should be adopted. Another recommendation I would make that is also very critical is there should be measures to mitigate the impact of this fuel subsidy removal. Provide CNG buses. If you want to have a social investment program for the extremely poor Nigerians, there should be a census. Nigeria last conducted census 2006. That's about 18 years ago.
We don't even know the numbers.
So we need to have a database to even know who are the poor, why are they poor, and what do they need. So answering this question will help us solve the challenges. And again, another important things we need to do is focus on critical infrastructures like electricity. I want to see that the money saved from the subsidy removal is channeled towards addressing the issue of electricity, which is Manufacturers Association of Nigeria have said 40% of their operational costs go on energy, electricity. So solving it will help MSMEs in Nigeria. And again, which is also very important, is government should be more transparent, they should be honest, there should be a clear communication line to Nigerians, and they should offer more listening ears to the yearnings of vast majority of Nigerians. But we end by saying this, which I say commonly, Nigerian leaders should manifest their manifestos. They gave us humongous promises during elections, manifest it. But we should also beam our satellite, not only on the federal government. We should begin to shift our satellite or demand for accountability from even the 30 state governors and 774 local government chairmen in Nigeria. They should support efforts of the federal government. Because if the federal government is moving at a particular pedestal and they are indifferent or they don't support the drive at the federal level, nothing will work. So we need the three tiers of government to work effectively for Nigerians to begin to see changes.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Victor Aliko, who is a development economist. Thank you so much for joining us on Midday Discourse today. And for the government, like Mr. Victor rightly said, manifest your manifestos. And a tree cannot make a forest. Coming together would help Nigerian economy grow and blossom. That's how much time will permit us to take on today's edition of Midday Discourse. My name is Samuel Odi, and a very big thank you to the production team for making today's production seamless. Bye for now.